Hey, everybody, welcome back. We are on our final session of the day for the Sanibel Island Writers Conference Online 2022. And I am thrilled to introduce you to Jenna Blum, whom you've seen all day with her gong and her scrimshaw. And there's her gong. And she changed. She's wearing a different shirt.
Scrimshaw, gong. I left my dildo up in my bedroom because I have decorum. Hello.
And we are also with, I knew we couldn't get through this without talking about dildos. We are also with Pam Houston, our keynote speaker. Before I do my official introduction for both of them, I just want to mention Eagles in Need one more time and thank everybody who's donated so far and encourage those who haven't. If you are able to, please donate to Eagles in Need. It will help people at Florida Gulf Coast University who are adversely affected by Hurricane Ian, students, staff, faculty who have been displaced, who have lost things, who are living in shelters, and who have lost their vehicles, everything. So please, if you can help, donate to that organization. I don't even know what to say. I'm so excited. I'm sorry that the day is over. It actually flew by. And it's wonderful that we're capping it with this keynote address from Pam, and moderated by Jenna. Pam Houston has been on my short list of people who I wanted to bring to the conference for basically since we started it. And I just thought, well, we're never going to get her, so I didn't even try. And then Steve Almond is buddies with her. And when I was talking to him, I said, I'm trying to figure out who to bring in for a keynote. He's like, have you ever thought of Pam Houston? I said, are you kidding me? I said, yeah, I've been thinking of her forever. And he's like, well, let me give her a call. And and like he called me back and he's like, Pam's in. I said, it's that oh my God, we should have done this years ago. Because and I told this story, and I think it was printed in a local newspaper years ago, back in the last century. I was in grad school getting my MFA out in California, and our fiction workshop leader said, hey, everybody bring in a short story collection that they like, that they would recommend to everybody else in class. And I think there were like 15 or 20 people in our workshop, and 5 people brought in Cowboys Are My Weakness. It had just come out like a year before. And so Pam has been on my radar ever since then. And I am just thrilled that she's here. And I'm also thrilled. I'm going to thank Jenna one more time because she is the CEO of A Mighty Blaze. And when we had to pivot and go online, she immediately contacted me and she's like, we got this. Even though we can't meet on Sanibel, like A Mighty Blaze is in your corner, and we will bring it to the people online. And so thank you to Jenna and her entire crew for helping us put this on and for basically saving the day. So thank you very much. Anyway, Jenna, in addition to being the CEO of A Mighty Blaze and the owner of Strange Shaped Scrimshaw, is the New York Times best-selling author of novels Those Who Save Us, The Storm Chasers, The Lost Family, and most recently the memoir Woodrow on the Bench, which is about her last 7 months with her beloved 15-year-old black lab, Woodrow. She has been teaching novel workshops at Grub Street Writers for over 20 years. And she has been with the Sanibel Island Writers Conference for the last 3 years. So we're so psyched that she's part of Team Sanibel. Pam Houston is the author of the memoir Deep Creek, Finding Hope in the High Country, which made me totally self-aware of how unrugged, non-rugged, in-rugged, whatever I am. As soon as I read this, I'm like, oh my God, am I a city slicker? And I feel like I should go camping more often after reading this. I would not survive living on a ranch, I'm sure. But it won the 2019 Colorado Book Award, the High Plains Book Award, and the Reading the West Advocacy Award. And more recently, Airmail Letters of Politics, Pandemics, and Place, co-authored with Amy Irvine. She is also author of the aforementioned Cowboys Are My Weakness, Contents May Have Shifted, and 4 other books of fiction and nonfiction, all published by Norton. She lives 9,000 feet above the sea level on a 120-acre homestead near the headwaters of the Rio Grande and teaches creative writing at UC Davis and at the Institute of American Indian Arts. She is co-founder and creative director of the literary nonprofit Writing by Writers and fiction editor at the environmental arts journal terrain.org. She raises Icelandic sheep and Irish wolfhounds and is a fierce advocate for the earth. Thank you both. Please take it away from here.
Bye, Tom. Thank you. He obligingly removes himself. So, Pam, the first question that we have from Grace, who has been here all day like a trooper, is what exactly does a keynote conversation entail? And I don't have any idea, except for the fact that I am here with one of my idols. And I know it's like a strange thing probably to hear when somebody says that about you. But you guys, I have been stalking Pam like Tom for years and years because I read a long time ago Waltzing the Cat and Cowboys Are My Weakness and the short story collections. And Pam's work is so brave, both in terms of its content and its form. Like, Pam, you were the first person who introduced me to sort of what I think of as a novel in stories, or a collection of stories that are all linked. But you write so bravely about women. You were the first woman I knew who was writing about women in rugged situations, like Tom said he would never survive in, which I co-sign. I probably would not either. Like, I hike on flat surface and I'm like, oh, there's a bug. And you were the first person to write really honestly, I thought, about trauma and emotional trauma and how to survive that with humor and with grace. And then when the pandemic shut us all down and I started the Blaze with my team of 35 amazing volunteers, I got to capture Pam like a butterfly in a jar and be like this at her for like an interview. And we discovered that we're both originally from New Jersey. So like, this is my story about how I am once again here with one of the writers I admire most in the entire world. So thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you, Jenna. And thank you, Tom. I have no idea what a keynote conversation entails. I got a little nervous there when Tom said address, because when we switched from keynote address to keynote conversation, I was like, oh, I guess I'm off the hook. I just have to answer questions. So, I mean, I can talk, God knows I can talk forever, but then I would get gonged. So, so I'm happy to talk about whatever direction you want us to go, Jenna. And I'm also happy to just start slinging words into the air if you're having a long day. I can do any of those things.
This is how we started the day, and this is how we end the day, and this is basically how it goes. I think like one of the things that I would love from our audience is for them to ask us questions, because you have two authors here who are, you know, career authors, if you will. So any question that you ever had for writers but you were afraid to ask, this is the time. Like, it's been a long and beautiful and amazing day for me, and we've captured Pam. So there's any question that you want to ask us. But I have many questions for you, actually. And, you know, don't worry about it being an address or a whatever. You probably like, I have to wear a dress. Like, no, like, I'm just going to ask questions. And the first question is really about home. We had discussed a little bit behind the scenes, you know, what did we want to talk about? And one of the things that Pam and I both co-signed was we wanted to talk about home in writing. Like, where is your home, literally, metaphorically, emotionally? And Pam, you're such a writer of place. Like, you are a great describer of setting, but more than that, you're a person who actively engages with her environment, cares about your environment so deeply, and is passionate about saving the earth, which obviously is in huge jeopardy. So can you talk a little bit about, like, what is your concept of physical home at the moment?
That's a great question, because it's really in transition right now. My memoir, Deep Creek, which you held up before, was really my accounting of that word home. How when I grew up in a violent alcoholic household as an only child to much older parents, I had no concept of home growing up. I had this one great babysitter who I write about, who basically saved my life, and everything good about me is because of her, Martha Washington. But in general, I didn't really have a home. And so when I wrote Cowboys Are My Weakness and was handed this check for $21,000, which was what I got paid up front for Cowboys Are My Weakness, and was, I thought, more money than I would ever had ever seen. I just said, I'm going to go find a home. And that's in a way what Deep Creek is about that search for a home. And I drove all over the West, and I tried to find somewhere that I could feel safe. And I picked this ranch, this beautiful ranch. I won't go into the whole story except to say I had my check for $21,000, and my agent had said, don't spend it all on hiking boots. And so I took that advice very seriously, and didn't even cash it, and literally drove around the West looking at vacant land and little tiny houses and just trying to find a place that would feel like home. I didn't have a job. I knew I had to write a second book. I was at, this precipice. My book Cowboys was out in the world doing pretty well, but I'd already been paid for it. So this was like my chance to get some sense of, I don't want to say like financial stability, just like emotional stability, basically. And I found the ranch after looking at many, many places in many, many states. And my $21,000 represented 4.7% down on the price of the ranch. And it had just been reduced. And I didn't know anything about real estate. I was basically living in my car. I mean, I had dropped out of grad school. I was living in my Toyota Corolla and my North Face tent. And the real estate guy who showed me the ranch, which was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, just high mountain meadow, 9,000 feet, 12,000 foot peaks all around. It was September, so the aspens were changing color. It was breathtakingly beautiful, very simple little house, but 100-year-old barn that anyone who follows me on Facebook knows that I take pictures of that barn like every freaking day. Most beautiful structure I've ever seen. Anyway, the real estate guy said, I think Donna Blair, who was the lady who was selling the ranch, he said, I think Donna Blair's going to like the idea of you. So why don't you give me a copy of Cowboys Are My Weakness and your $21,000, and I'll see what I can do. And Donna Blair agreed to sell me the ranch for 4.7% down, no job, and a signed hardcover of my first book. So in so many ways, that book determined the outcome of my life. It not only made it so that I could write another book, which is of course what all writers want every book to accomplish. It also bought me the ranch in a sense. Like, she believed in me, and I thought, well, maybe I can believe in myself. And for 32 years, the ranch has been home, and it has felt very safe and very protected and a wonderful place to write. It has 12,000 foot mountains on 3 sides and the Rio Grande River on the 4th side. It is geographically a nest, and I have loved it. I will say that part of Colorado has gotten a little bit violent with the election of Donald Trump and the huge rise in the number of guns. I kind of can't take a walk without hearing gunshots. And so I'm really sort of asking myself every day now, do I still feel safe here? Is this still home? Because if a place can be home for 32 years and then it's not, as we all know, a marriage can be good for 32 years and then it's not, a job can be your dream job for 32 years and then it's not. And so I'm kind of waiting to see what happens on Tuesday. And I'm kind of waiting to see, how it feels going forward. Because as much as I've loved it, and the book Deep Creek is a ode to how I loved it, how it turned me into a grown-up, how it made me responsible to things, to something bigger than myself. I don't have children, of course I have animals, and we know we love our animals desperately. And so it turned me into a grown-up in the way having kids does that for some people. For me, it was the ranch, having to take care, having to get up in the middle of the night and give an animal an intravenous shot, like with the vet talking me through it because it was a blizzard. I mean, having to get on my roof in the middle of winter and break the ice cap off the top of my chimney because we were getting smoked out. I mean, it's a pretty remote place, and I learned how to use tools, and I'm not handy, but I'm tenacious, and so all of that, like, I couldn't be more grateful for that time and that space to write my books and to raise animals and to love them and to become responsible and a grown up. And I wish the country would get itself together and I could just live out my life there, but I'm not sure it's going to happen.
It's such a complex and interesting answer, and I have about 5,000 responses, but for the sake of time and your sanity, I will limit myself. And I remember the last time we talked was in the summer of 2020, I believe. And one of the things that I remember you saying, and that I so often quote you saying, is that toward the end of your interview, you were talking about this beautiful place you live. And you said, I would not be surprised someday if I looked down my driveway and saw this posse of men coming up my driveway with guns, like coming to take me away. And I remember, I'm usually fairly Pollyanna-ish, but that was a moment when I was like, I actually really need to be honest about this. And I said, if that happens to you, like, first of all, I will be very angry. And second of all, I will pick up the flag. And I hope if something like that happens to me, somebody will pick up the flag that I'm carrying and so on. And so I'm not surprised, but I am sad and aggrieved on your behalf that this place that is so beloved to you still feels like it might be sort of threatened by the shifting currents in our country. And this is interesting, you guys. I think that both Pam and I are writers who don't have kids, but we have a strong sense of place that is mutable based on our deep love of country as well. I have a house in rural Minnesota that I'm selling, that I'm going to clean out in February because I was the only person in my county who voted a certain way. And I was like, I feel too out of water, and I don't know who to talk to anymore. So I feel as though home for me has increasingly been a battle between the love I have for my physical space. Like, that is my heartland in Minnesota. My mom was born there. My grandmother was born in this town, like, yards away from this house, and where my people are. And my people are primarily right now in the Northeast, even though, of course, all the people I'm working with on this call are like Chicago and, Colorado, California, Washington, and Tom is in, I don't know where Tom is, probably Florida. But so there's a sort of stretchiness to the idea of where my people are. And yet I was like, I'm going to be mostly in the Northeast because that's where I feel physically safe. And then the pandemic has given me family everywhere. How has your definition of your community shifted during the pandemic?
Well, when you were talking, Jenna, I was thinking, like, honestly, I mean, how sad it is that, we've become a country where people don't feel safe in the place they've lived for 30 years. I mean, that's a sad, sad thing, and I don't want to dwell on the sadness, but it also makes me mad, like, there are days, and I'm sure this was true about you with your farm, because I know how much that means to you. We've talked about it. And like, where you're like, I'm not there. They can't get me out, which is something I think a lot. I think they can't get me out. I've been here for 32 years. And then I think, well, but they have the guns, like that's, but anyway, like, I don't know, I can't help it, but I still hope for a way that, like, we back off from all this and everybody can live wherever they want. And, I really do. Like, I'm not out of hope for that. But I am, anyway, how did home change for me during the pandemic? I mean, this is not exactly what you're asking me, but I had long COVID for about a year. I think when we talked the last time, I had just been run off the road by the guys in the Trump truck, and they had like cornered me in a ditch in my Prius because I was committing the offense of driving a gas-saving vehicle with no bumper stickers, mind you, not a bumper sticker, not one. And I was sick. I had long COVID then. And so honestly, what has happened to my whole world since long COVID, I'm better now. I would say I'm 80% better. I feel so happy to be well because I felt so bad for so long. I had terrible brain fog and just terrible fatigue and all kinds of weird nosebleeds and kidney stuff. And anyway, it ran around my body as it does for some people. And I'm much, much better now. But one thing it taught me was like what we have is right now, like what we have is today. And I know this is such a cliche, you know, everybody who gets a cancer diagnosis, everyone, but I really did think like my heart would stop. Like I thought I was going to fall down dead, like not so much from the guys with the guns, but from long COVID. And now, you know, it taught us the thing that has always been true, which is what we have is today. So honestly, that's a long way of saying like, I'm here in this little cool, drippy cottage in Inverness, California right now. And just for 2 nights, and it's my home, you know, like I'm loving it. It's raining. California is so happy to see the rain. You know, I walked on the beach this morning with my dear friend and her dog. Like, okay, so that was great. We still had today. There was the waves. We saw a seal. The seals are still alive. All the whales aren't dead yet. So like, this is true too. You know, we spend a lot of time thinking like, because I have to think forward. Where am I going to make a home? Where would I be most comfortable writing? How am I going to move out of the ranch and still have time to finish a book? Like all these big future questions. But honestly, the long COVID gave me this like, you've got today. How was it? Pretty good. That's a win. You know, that's a win. Like I got to go walk on the beach today. And, you know, a few days ago, I was at my beautiful ranch playing with my horses. And, you know, in a little while, I'm going to get to go to Namibia, which is a place I've always dreamed of going. So like I think for me, it's not so much about space as it is about time. Like time has gotten drastically shorter in my mind. And we don't know what's coming. We don't know if civil war is coming. We don't know if women are going to be put in camps for speaking out. It could happen. So like today I had a really good coffee. I had a really gooey cinnamon morning bun. I walked on the beach. It's raining. Like those are all wins, you know? And so home, I think now, because I think we've learned that we're going to have to be fluid. We're going to have to be able to pick up and go. We're going to have to be able to change. We're going to have to give up things possibly that we have taken for granted. I think like home is kind of where you make it right now. And like, hopefully with people you love to be with, honestly. I mean, everything I'm saying sounds like a greeting card and I apologize for that, but I really have been given this lesson in like all the things you thought you could count on are no longer here. So yet the seal, yet the whale, yet the rain, like all these things are here.
Yes, I love that. I wonder, I also, like you have sort of predicated my life on certain ideas of things being lasting. And one of them was always my identity as a writer. And I'm wondering, we're getting a lot of questions from our audience about writing and creative process and maybe how this intersects with the conversation that we're having. Like if you're a writer in a sort of a shifting world, Charlotte said, I would love to hear more about the writing and creative process, and people have co-signed that. And I think that yearning to hear about your writing and your creative process kind of dovetails with this other great question from Remy. Have you noticed a change of your writing or the way you write a story? Like where in your sort of being present appreciation of life right now, how do you write? Like where does the writing fit into your day?
I have just started writing a long short story. I'm finishing up a book of short stories. I wasn't able to write for over a year when I was so sick. But I think my writing maybe has gotten more urgent. I think it's gotten a little less apologetic. I think celebrating the earth, which has always been a huge part of my writing, that feels more urgent than ever, bearing witness to not just what we're losing, species, environments, but also what we still have, the beauty that's still out there. My writing process, how I write, has always been the same, and that has not changed. I tend to move around the world, really paying attention, with my senses open. That's generally the way I write. I don't write from ideas or feelings. I write from my five senses. And if something in the world really arrests my attention, glimmers or shimmers at me, I grab it and I write it down. And I try to write it down in as much sensory detail as I can. And then when I'm making my stories, what I'm doing is I'm putting together those glimmers into clunks and chunks, clumps and chunks, not clunks, and seeing if together they make more than the sum of their parts. I'm really kind of a collagist as a writer. I don't believe in plot, though I have plot. I just don't start with it. I think about amassing I feel like when I'm writing, it's like going to the farmer's market and getting a bunch of really great organic vegetables and then bringing them home. And if the vegetables are really great, I kind of can't screw up the soup, unless I put in too much cumin or something. But I and cumin, is just like that overwriting, that you always have a chance to cut later. So I just
exclamation points everywhere. It's like the exclamation points are like the cumin of the punctuation world.
And so so that's always been true. It's still what I do. I had a lot of kind of crazy characters come into my life in the last few weeks, which got my butt in the chair and started writing a new big, rangy, out of control short story right now, which is a happy thing because I haven't written much fiction lately. But so that's my method. I also think, just one more thing, and I'm trying to keep the subject on writing. But I think like every decade you learn, like every decade you stop apologizing for yourself in some way. And I think that's true as a person and certainly as a woman, but I think it's also true as a writer, and I think I spent a couple decades thinking I was faking it, or thinking I was going to be found out, or thinking that I was supposed to write like somebody. I had a person, actually a Florida writer, as a matter of fact, Bob Shikochis, who some of you probably know or have heard of. And he said to me when I was a graduate student that I would never amount to anything until I learned how to write like Dostoevsky. And I just say that because I bring that up sometimes, not to be mean to Bob, who I like, but to be like, writing teachers say like the most outrageous and crappiest things. And if I was going to say one thing to you, to you all writers today, I would be like, if somebody's saying something to you and it's not making sense to you, for instance, you'll never amount to anything until you learn how to write like Dostoevsky. But it might be really much more particular to you, like you should stop writing about your uncle, or you don't know, you have too many flashbacks, or whatever. It could be just about anything. Like if it's not making sense to you in your head, you just put your fingers in your ears and you go la 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 la. Because what workshop is for, and what the study of creative writing is for you to get told what you already know but wouldn't admit to yourself. And so if you're in workshop, what you want to listen for is the thing where you go, oh yeah, of course, I was cheating. I thought I could get away with it. Oh yeah, I know that's true. But if someone says something like absolutely bonkers, like you'll never amount to anything until you learn to write like Dostoevsky, you just don't even write it down. Don't even put it in your little notebook. because it's just going to haunt you, as this is clearly haunting me 40 years later. And I'm like, man, I never did learn how to write like Dostoevsky, but really, you know, thank God. Like, anyway, I don't know how I went down the road of Dostoevsky, but I have always written the same way, and I have become less apologetic about it. I think that's true, you know, and I think that's every decade you live, or every year that you live, maybe you have the opportunity to stop beating yourself up as much. And I think 60, I just turned 60, and that's a big one. It's a big one for that.
Yeah, I think that age is a privilege in and of itself, right? Like when my dog was super old and I was carrying him in and out of my apartment building, one day I carried him past one of the cleaners of the building, and she said, "Is your dog sick?" And I was like, "No, he's old." And she said, "That is not an illness, that is a privilege." But I think one of the rare privileges of age too is a sort of, and forgive me, Tom is going to grip his head, but it's like a don't give a fuckness about, you know, the things that you used to apologize for as a writer, like maybe keeping your language constrained or corseted in a way, or imposter syndrome. Like, I don't know a writer in the world who doesn't struggle with imposter syndrome, no matter how far along you get in your career. But hopefully that erodes a little bit year by year, even though we still have those old instructors perching on our shoulders saying, like, "You're not writing like Dostoevsky," or, you know, in my case, my grad school director said, "This person has more talent in his little finger than the rest of you have in all of your bodies put together." And all of us were like, "Oh, you know, patently untrue." And yet they're still there. And every year you're just like, you know, knocking them off a little more, because every day you sit down and do the work. And we had a couple of questions that pertain to how do you actually get yourself to do the work? Like, when do you call yourself a writer, and how do you overcome block? So I'm going to move from, like, you know, the challenge of imposter syndrome to the challenge of block. Do you believe in writer's block? And if so, how do you chop through it?
Well, I'm going to say I don't believe in writer's block because that feels like the true answer. What I do believe, Robert, is that nobody ever said writing should be available to you all the time. You know, I have a lot of times when I can't write, a lot of times, you know, for a week or a month. And, you know, in the old days, I would be like, well, that's it. I've lost it. Like, I better find a new profession. You know, like it used to really scare me when that happened. Although I never called it writer's block, because, like, to me, it doesn't feel like a block. It feels more like a miracle when I can actually write. You know, it feels like, you know, you know, puking after walking around sick for weeks. And so, like, that feels like the good part. Like, that feels like the good accident is actually being able to write. Like, block doesn't feel like the condition. But in any case, I don't think we were meant to make art on demand. You know, like, I don't think we were meant to make art quickly. Nobody ever said, you know, write beautifully and quickly. Like we, you know, the way we live our lives, like, demands speed and money, you know, but in fact, you know, art, there's no reason art shouldn't be slow, you know? And so I guess for me, I mean, I had an interesting experience this summer. One reason I didn't write at all this summer, even though I was feeling better, is because I was judging the National Book Award in fiction. And so I read literally 150 whole novels, plus 50 more that were in the kind of big finalist pool, plus put my eyes on 300 others. So all I did was read and listen to the automated voice in Natural Reader Pro, like, read me books while I was feeding the horses or cooking dinner. Like, there's no way you can read 500 books in a summer, of course. And so I didn't do anything else. And I thought, oh my God, this is going to make me want to run screaming from, you know, ever wanting to look at words or think about them again. But it was just the opposite. I got so filled up. I felt like my gas tank got so full with all these amazing books that I read, especially on the fiction side, because I just wrote a memoir, and then I wrote a book of letters. So I haven't read fiction in a while. I mean, I haven't written fiction in a while, but I got my fiction tank full. And now like, I'm so excited to write fiction because I read so much and so much of it was so good. And it just made me really excited. So this is all part of the writer's block answer. Like if you can't write, I mean, if you can't write forever, okay, that's a problem, but if you can't write for a couple of months and you don't really know why, read. Say, I'm going to read the 10 novels on the National Book Long List. And like, you will finish that and be like, okay, I'm so excited. And I mean, and I saw that question go up there real quick about hating what you've written. And just let me say, that's the cost of admission. Nobody on earth likes what they've just written. Nobody, not me, not people way more famous than me. Nobody sits down and writes a first draft and goes, man, I nailed that. Like nobody, everybody hates what they've just written. And if you get those weird moments of thinking, oh man, I really nailed that scene, you're going to read it the next day and you're going to be like, oh my God, this sucks. So like, it's just part of it. It's part of it. It's part of it to write badly. Like nobody can do this without writing badly. Nobody. And then you make it better because you have the tools. Like it's beautiful. You write a shitty first draft and then you write then it gets better. And that's the beauty of it. But everyone feels like a fraud. Nobody writes good first drafts, and everyone can't write sometimes. Honestly, that's a fact.
That actually makes me feel better. I am like, I told you I was a Pollyanna. Like there are times when I'm writing a first draft where I'm like, I knocked that scene. Sorry. Yeah. But that scene remains intact from usually the first draft to the final draft. And I feel you were talking about being a collage writer, like I'm a mosaic writer, and the rest of the book kind of gets built around those scenes that are then not touched. And then I write a lot of crap. Like you just have to write a lot of crap. We had a great question about what book do you have, like a comfort food book is the way I think about it. Cause I often will read when I can't write. And when I'm stuck, actually I go to the short story. Because it was my original form of writing. I didn't start out writing novels. I wrote when I was 11 about my social studies teacher who I had a crush on. But otherwise, like I started writing short stories. And now when I read short stories, it makes writing seem accessible to me. And I think, oh yeah, this is why I love writing. I can do this because I know I can maybe write a short story like this one. Do you have a book that's like that is a reliable jump starter for you?
Not one book, but I do think, I saw Patrick's question there, just to dovetail that in with your question. But I think there's two kinds of reading, sort of. Like for me, there's like the reach for the stars reading where I'm like, this is so dazzling and it makes me want to strive. And then there's like the reading a really good, simple first novel and going, okay, I could do that, So I think there's like two ways to go in that reading. I mean, I wouldn't read crap, because I don't think that does anybody any good. But sometimes to read, I think there's two kinds of pleasure with reading, at least for me, when I'm not writing and I'm nervous about not writing and I want to start writing again. I think there's like the, oh my God, that book was so amazing. And I want to feel like I could create something one day that beautiful. And then there's the kind of, all right, I really enjoyed that book and it didn't have a ton of bells and whistles that I didn't understand. And I can probably do that, So I do think both of those things are valuable.
Here's another great craft question that I love from Dorian. How do you move through to each part of your writing, like transition wise? Mine always feel clunky. So questions about, I'm not sure if Dorian, you can put this in the chat. Are you talking about draft to draft? Or are you talking about scene to scene? But Pam, because you're a mosaic writer, and in the same way that I'm also a little bit of a mosaic writer, how do you go from one stage of that collecting things to a polished draft?
You know, I mean, as I read that question, I think, you know, I'm a big believer in white space. I like white space on the page because it gives the reader somewhere to be, somewhere to stand, somewhere to sit, somewhere to interact. You know, one of the things I'm always trying to teach is trust the reader, you know, trust the reader to be able to make these leaps, to be able to find the subtext. You know, I don't like books that tell me, that give me the emotional context of everything as if I'm not really keeping up. So in terms of like spatially putting those chunks together, like sometimes white space is awesome. Just and like let the reader build a bridge, let the reader jump across that gap, because then the reader feels like they're really participating. Sometimes that white space is too big for the reader to jump across, and so then I'm looking for another little chunk, another little glimmer to put in there to be like a stepping stone for the reader to get from like A to B with this little A.1 in the middle. If you mean from draft to draft, for me, that's a matter of literally like picking up, like playing a shell game, you know, like picking up chunks and moving them around and trying them here. And, oh, I thought this happened 2 pages from the end, but it's really the opening paragraph, just moving hunks around until they settle in a way that feels intuitively correct, because so much of this is intuition. You know, I like to say, like, if you don't invite your subconscious to the art making party, you are not making art. Like, it has to be involved. So I'm following hunches about which of these glimmers might go together. They're not logical always, and they're not chronological. Sometimes they're just weird associative meaning between them. And so if I get them to sit just right on the page, they kind of click into place in a way.
It's like those rock cairns I see people building in the woods when I go hiking, where you have the rocks that don't seem to fit together, but if you put them just the right way, the whole thing gets sort of built. Can I ask some boring ass writer craft questions, which is like, when you're moving stuff around, you're making me think about novelists I work with who literally have like a string across their wall and like a clothesline, and they move index cards around, or people who write by hand. Like I actually write on a metal board in my study, like on chalkboard paint. So yes, I write on the walls like a lunatic. Do you write by hand with a pen? Do you write with Scrivener? Like, tell us how you actually write.
I don't even, like, I know what Scrivener is. I've heard tell of the Scrivener, but I've never actually opened it. No, I do. I write in my computer, and I have a lot of different documents, and I move a lot of pieces around. At some point, especially if it's a longer work, I will print it out and cut it up the way I used to do before the age of word processing. And I used to like cut it out and put it all over my bathroom floor and move it around physically. Cool. I don't always do that. I didn't ever do that with Deep Creek, weirdly, but I have a, you know, I like puzzles, you know, I like puzzles. And if I can make it like a puzzle, I can usually keep those pieces in my mind in the computer, even though, of course, I have done that terrible thing where you double cut and then you lose. I have done that a lot of times.
I have a couple more questions. Actually, I have one that's mine, and then 2 that readers have asked that I really love. And one of them is from Charlotte. Charlotte. It was about peeling back layers of yourself. It was a very poetically asked question. There it is. Whew. For both of you, if you care to answer, do you feel it's important to really peel back the layers and reveal a lot about your deepest self and truths? Which is a really interesting and feels sort of like a loaded question in some ways.
Yes.
In a nice way.
My answer is yes. No, my answer is honestly, I don't know why else to do this. Like if I wasn't writing to understand what had happened to me and to understand myself, I don't honestly know why I would be writing. Honestly, like to me, that's why I started writing, you know, when I was like this weird scared little kid in a house full of alcoholics. I started writing when I was like 2. Honestly, that's not a joke, because my wonderful babysitter, my aforementioned wonderful babysitter, Martha Washington, taught me to read when I was 2. Mm-hmm. So I have never not written, and it's the way I understand the world. And it's the way I understand myself. And it's the way I get really honest with myself. So I don't know. Honestly, that's like, so by far, like numbers 1 through 10 about why I write. I don't even know what number 11 is.
Mm-hmm. A question about that, because I think about this a lot when I teach the novel workshop, and I feel as though my novelists, who are all ridiculously talented, like they're so incredibly talented, they also are like a chocolate box of, like a Forrest Gump metaphor, like a chocolate box, but of personalities, but also of reasons why they write, I think. And some of them write because they're trying to hack through those emotional Gordian knots, and some of them are writing from headlines, or they're interested in situation, or whatever. You're a teacher as well. You teach voluminously, like all over the world. Do you feel that there are people in your classes who are writing from a different reason? And if so, how do you reach those people, reach those writers?
I know exactly what you're asking me, but I would argue that in almost every case, and this may be like, my demographic might, self-regulate for this, but I think even if they're writing from the headlines, they're untying those Gordian knots, because something in the headline, whatever that headline was, like if you want to dedicate yourself, for 8 years or 10 years or however long it takes to write a novel, to like a news event, especially like from history, the Hindenburg or whatever, name it. Then there's something about the Hindenburg that unlocks your Gordian knots. Like you don't make that decision lightly. You don't make that decision because it's cool, even if you think you do. Like you don't go, oh, the Hindenburg's cool. That's kind of interesting. You do it because you had nightmares as a child of like being in a flaming balloon or something or the flaming balloon is a metaphor for your crazy Uncle Charlie. And so I don't think you can get away from that part of it, even if, unless you're writing a certain kind of nonfiction. But if you're having characters encountering life in whatever era, I think it is about you, even if none of the characters are auto-fictional in any way.
Mm-hmm. I think that's right. Out of all the headlines in all the world, why would that one walk into your story, right? There's a reason that we're drawn to what we're drawn to, I think. And there's another great, great question about our young writer selves. Maybe I actually made Cheryl Strayed cry asking her this question, and I was so proud. It was like a life made moment when I was like, what would you tell your young self, when you're growing up very, very, very poor in Minnesota and like not knowing where your meals came from? What would you tell yourself? And she cried, just saying how lucky she was. And so Allie wants to know, if there's one thing you wish you knew before diving deep into the writing world, what would it be? And I don't know if this is, Allie, a question to our young writer selves, like before we became writers, because I don't remember before I became a writer, and neither did Pam, but like maybe like, I don't know.
I have an answer, and it is a predictable answer, but it's a true one. And this is the thing that's very, very hard for people to believe until it happens to them. But there is nothing better than that feeling that Jenna described earlier, where you nail a scene. There is nothing better that will ever happen to you that is better than that. And this is what it's so hard to believe it. And you're probably all rolling your eyes, but like if you win the National Book Award, if Oprah picks you, if you get to buy a $3 million house, like none of those things that you're imagining, like the things that's going to happen, and you're finally going to be taken seriously, and you're going to stop hating yourself, and all of your self-loathing is going to go away. It won't. It won't at all. In fact, it'll just get sort of weirdly more complicated. But like the best thing you already have, like you already have it. Like the best thing, like I'm writing about this crazy boat I was on in Greenland, interestingly, with a known sexual predator and 40 of his cult followers. That's a weird thing that happened to me recently. So I know, crazy.
Does.
It would only happen to me. But I'm trying so hard to get Greenland, which is a miraculous, beautiful, incredible landscape. And I'm trying to get these like nerdy cult followers of this weird little dude who has been banned from like 16 college campuses. And those two things are like two very different challenges. And I have the chance to really get it right. And to have, I'm writing it as fiction, but to have it be funny and to have it be beautiful and to put that incredible, disappearing landscape of ice, like up against these like nerdy rapists, like it's heaven. Like it's heaven for me. Like I can't believe there was only 12 of us who weren't in the cult and they didn't tell us. Like, so it's like, how did I wind up here? It's a miracle. And so I'm trying really hard to get that right. And I have the chance to get it right. And that feeling when I stand up from my chair and think, okay, yeah. And there's going to be like 8,000 revisions after that. But when I really stand up from my chair and go like, okay, I got it. I got that little MF on this page. And it's the best. There's never going to be anything better. I don't care if that story like is the first story in Best American Short Stories 2023. It won't matter compared to that feeling of really getting it. That's what after like the good stuff happens to you on the other side of writing. The writing is the best part. I swear to God, even when it's kind of miserable, which it often is.
All of that. And those are the rewards for the moments of misery, is that you can always write your way to those moments if you keep at it. I feel as though the success moments also, like when you get Best American Short Stories or hit the bestseller list or whatever, Oprah, or I don't know, David Tennant makes your trilogy into a movie, Margaret, that's going to happen to you. It feels to me tethered like a balloon. Like the success is like up here somewhere, but it's all tethered to the moment when I'm sitting in the chair and I got something right. And often like I am trying to do it. And then sometimes it happens that I do get it right. And then sometimes there are these moments that I think of as writer grace, where you're working on a scene and your engine is on and it's really running and it's running hot. And then there's a line or two that just comes from nowhere and lands on you like a little glowing meteor or something. And you're like, oh my God, that's exactly what I meant to say, but it's even better than I thought it could have been. And you throw that into the book. In my experience, that's what readers most respond to. They always quote those lines back to me. And I do tell them quite honestly, like that didn't come from me. It was just that my machine was on. And those moments are what I define as actual grace, like spiritual grace. That's what feels like spiritual grace to me. And so all of the moments of success are somehow tethered to those hours where you're sitting in the chair and it was hot and the sun's coming through the western window and you're sweating and you're like, and you've worn the same sweatpants for 3 days and you've been like laboring in the fields of your imagination and getting it wrong most of the time. And then sometimes you just get it right. And it's like, there's no better feeling than that practical magic. I totally agree with that, Pam.
I think of it as like jumping in the river. Like I think like you stand on the bank of the river forever and then you jump in and it carries you for a little bit before like it spits you out into an eddy. Like that's what I think of. Like you're in the river, you get to be in the river for a minute, like of whatever collective consciousness or something.
The beautiful river that is carrying us all along. I could ask more questions, but I think there's like nothing better that we can say to people than that, right? Except maybe like keep paddling through the rapids because we're all carried along by the same river. No. Unless you have something else that you want to say to people.
Well, only just like to just validate your urge to tell your stories. I mean, we started out talking about like how I don't feel safe at the ranch anymore, which isn't really that much about writing, but it is about writing in this way that like the only way, if there's another side to this, like the only way through this is to understand each other's stories. Like that's it. Like that's our only way, is to listen to each other and like tell our own experience honestly and tell our deep experience and then have someone else respond to it. Like that's the solace and always has been in books and art and plays and, all kinds of art forms. We're saying, hi, I'm here, the hands on the caves. Like you walk into one of those caves in France and you see the hands and you just weep because it's like, oh my God, I was here, and we can still, like we're all in this hole of trouble, but we could like knock on the wall. There's other people on the other side of the wall. And that's what writing your story is. So, I mean, I've been saying for so many years, this is the most important time there's ever been to tell your stories, but like it keeps getting more important. So, so I just want to validate that. I just want to validate your urge to tell your stories, because that is honestly the only way I can think that we're going to care about each other, going forward as things get harder with the climate and whatnot.
Yeah, writing creates that empathic space. I feel like in Bridesmaids, when Kristen Wiig keeps coming back to take the mic away from the other bridesmaid, I'm like, that's nice, Pam, I'm taking the mic. But I also think that when you are feeling insecure about telling your story, or it is getting tough and it just feels like an ethic and it will never be right, you're the only person who can tell your particular story. And that is your contribution to empathy, and the kind of empathy that Pam is talking about. And that is really, really, really important.
And anytime that happens to you and you're feeling like, oh shit, this is just terrible, that usually means you're about to reveal something. Like that means you're afraid. And it just means that something's about to pop out that's going to be really good. It like try to push through that. Like, I hate myself. I hate myself. I hate myself. Because it usually means that like some truth is about to go bloop and like pop out. It's like the last bit of your super ego resisting.
Totally agree. So overcome that ish. And now I'm going to gong myself off. I'm not going to gong you off, Pam. You can stay here. But I'm going to gong us off, because I think there's no better way to finish than talking about like writer empathy for people, and just keep going. Everybody just keep going. Right? You ready? Tom, I'm going to gong off your whole conference now. He's like thrilled. I summoned them with my gong.
You did.
Well done. Can I just say that I love that we finished the conference on that note?
Yeah, same here.
Telling our stories like this is the way. I think that is absolutely true. It's such a humbling but like powerful idea that we are all, kind of made of the stories that we have, and all of our stories are separate but intertwined. And the only way we're going to get through all the mess is to take everybody's stories into consideration. But we have to tell our stories before we can get there. It's such a beautiful thing. And I mean, it's one of the, underlying like the driving forces behind a conference like this, I think. Wouldn't you say, Tom?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's why we started it, and that's why we keep coming back every year, is because every year we get to hear stories like this. We get to be inspired to tell stories like this. And and it empowers the students, and it enriches everyone's experience. So thank you so much for adding, for capping this year like that, and for carrying on the tradition of the conference that way.
Yes, thank you. And we just want to take a couple minutes to say some quick thank yous and wrap everything up here. Before we do that, though, I just want to mention one more time, if the Blaze crew can throw those links into the chat again for hurricane recovery, Eagles in Need, community housing and resources, put it on Pete's tab. People need help. They have stories. Let's help them so that they can tell their stories too when they get all their stuff together. But we also want to thank, I'll start off by thanking Jenna and Pam for your wonderful conversation. It's fantastic.
Pam, I love you, Pam. I'm going to get you at some other conference, and maybe in person next time.
Fantastic. But we also want to thank all of our people at FGCU, in particular the administration, for signing off on our last minute pivot to the online conference. And we especially want to thank our chair, Kim Jackson, the deans that we've had over the course of putting this conference together, Chuck Lindsay and Clay Motley, Rochelle Jackson at the foundation, Lori and Emily and the Creative Writing Club. We also want to thank Nancy Stetson, and the crew at Florida Weekly, Kevin Toller for doing our artwork and graphic design. I want to thank our buddy Andy at Grossman, Roth, Yaffa, and Cohen, and others who have donated to the conference, including Julie Clark Ireland. Thank you guys so much. That means a lot to us. I want to thank again Jenna and her team from the Mighty Blaze, and Margaret flipping the switches back, behind the scenes. I was watching the two of them, actually, Jenna and Margaret, talking about Margaret's new book the other day. And one of the things that Jenna said that is just a great advertisement for what they do at the Mighty Blaze is, where else can you meet authors and not even have to put on pants? Go to their website. They've got tons of stuff. If you liked what you saw today, you could spend months and months watching all of the good stuff they have online there. And then also, of course, like our presenters, everybody had to change their plans at the last minute. And they all came through. It was fantastic. We're so proud. And so just happy that, these are people in our lives, and they're fantastic, and they're great teachers, and they're great speakers. And then for everybody that showed up, thank you guys so much. It's been really awesome watching the conversations going on in the chats and the different sessions that we had today. I've enjoyed it so much. My head is full. My heart is full. Did I forget to thank anybody, Tom? I'm sure I did.
No, man. I mean, you've covered everyone, I think. I mean, there's tons of other people that we could have thanked, because there are so many people that, have contributed to this. But I mean, we just want to thank everyone at FGCU. We want to thank everybody who signed up for the conference initially and were able to move over to the online format with us. Again, all the presenters. Yeah, I mean, and really, we're grateful to everyone who tuned in and who responded throughout the day. It was really gratifying to see how engaged everyone was.
Mm-hmm.
And
For
Jason,
sure.
I want to thank you, man. You're like the best guy to work with. You're so easy to work with, and it's been a blast doing this with you.
Thank you. Same to you.
Maybe I should thank you guys. Thanks, guys. Thanks, guys, for having this conference. It's like every year Tom and Jason build a jetliner, and we all get on board. And
while we're flying.
While you're flying, yeah. So you guys, it occurs to me that perhaps I should have said thank you.
Well, we couldn't do it without you, Jenna, and you guys. I mean, it's been a real blessing for us, I guess, to know that we can rely on you, especially when we had to change plans at the last minute. You know what I mean? So we're thankful for that, and grateful for the work that you do in general. You know
what? I want to thank everybody at Blue Flower Arts.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody at Blue Flower Arts has been great too. They've been wonderful to work with, and Frank Riley at High Road Touring, who represents Ike, has also been terrific.
I'm just going to urge everybody, before we all release you into the world, to have margaritas to celebrate the virtual Sanibel, or chocolate, whatever your choice is, that please follow the conference, and please donate, if you would, to the people who were so affected by the hurricane. And please follow Pam, who will take you on all of her adventures and buy all of her books. And if you go to a Mighty Blaze on Bookshop, all of the books from all of the writers we talked to today are all gathered there. And you readers and writers are going to be able to keep writers alive. It's like clapping your hands to keep Tinkerbell alive. So I thank you for that in advance. And keep reading and keep writing. And anytime you want help, encouragement, support, any of the 4 people on this screen will help you do that. And hell yes, vote. Yes. Thank you, Margaret.
Thanks, Margaret. And follow Mighty Blaze, because they do this kind of stuff all the time. They have the best writers in the country, in the world, on their platform all week, every week. It's like they always have terrific writers. Whenever I sign on to social media, I see that a Mighty Blaze is interviewing an author that I love. So please follow them as well.
Thank you. We may or may not have pants on, but yes, vote. Don't forget to vote.
Okay.
Right.
Don't forget to vote. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next year, hopefully on the island.
Hopefully in person.
Fingers crossed. We're going to help them build back.
Yes.
Do I get to come back when it's in person?
That would be great. We have a paddleboard with your name on it.
I paddleboard also.
We'll get another paddleboard, or we'll get a tandem paddleboard.
Yeah, that's better.
You guys can row together.
All right. Everybody, thank you so much for such a tremendous day.